I never imagined my own son would shove me so violently at the Christmas dinner table that I would fall to the floor in front of the whole family just so his father-in-law could take my place. What he didn't know was that on that very night, I would change his life forever. When he woke up the next day, 47 missed calls would be waiting for him because sometimes consequences arrive when you least expect them. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. My name is Michael Miller. I'm 68 years old, and I spent my entire life building a business empire from scratch. I lost my beloved wife Rose 5 years ago, and since then my son David became the most important thing in my world. Well, that's what I thought, until the night of December 24th, 2024. That afternoon I arrived at David's house with a heart full of joy. I had bought special gifts for my grandchildren, Jacob and Isabel, and I brought a $300 bottle of wine I had been saving for a special occasion. The house was decorated with golden lights, and the aroma of roast lamb filled the air. Everything seemed perfect for a family night. "Grandpa Michael!" the children shouted as they ran towards me. Jacob at 15 was already taller than me, while Isabel 12 still clung to my neck like she did when she was little. Their sincere hugs were the only moment of genuine happiness I would experience that night. Teresa, my daughter-in-law, greeted me with a forced smile. There was always something in her eyes that made me uncomfortable, as if she measured every word I said. "Hi, Michael. So glad you got here early." David appeared from the kitchen, but his greeting was distant, almost mechanical. "Hey, Dad. Just leave your coat there." I noticed something strange in the atmosphere. There was a tension I couldn't quite identify. The table was set for 8 people, but there were only 6 of us. David, Teresa, the kids, me, and we were waiting for someone else. "Is someone else coming?" I asked, looking at the extra place setting. "Yes, my father will be here in a moment," Teresa answered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was referring to Anthony Moore, a 72-year-old businessman who had always been my silent competitor in the business world. When Anthony arrived, everything changed. David completely transformed, becoming helpful and attentive in a way I had never seen with me. "Mr. Moore, what a pleasure to have you here." "Come in. Come in." I thought it was strange, but I decided to ignore it. After all, it was Christmas, and I wanted to enjoy it with my family. We sat down at the table and I took my usual spot, the one that had always been mine at family celebrations, at the head of the table next to David. I had sat in that seat for years, ever since Rose passed away, and family dinners moved to my son's house. But as Anthony approached, David looked at me with an expression I will never forget. Cold, calculating, ruthless. "Dad, I need you to get up from there." What I asked, confused. "Why, that seat is for Mr. Moore. He's the guest of honor." I felt like I had been slapped across the face. "David's son. I've always sat here. It's my place in this family." The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Teresa was looking down, uncomfortable. The kids had stopped talking. Anthony stood there watching the scene with a mix of awkwardness and satisfaction. "Dad, don't make this difficult. Move. I don't understand, David. What's going on here?" That's when it happened. David walked over to me, put his hands on my shoulders, and pushed me with such force that I lost my balance. My 68-year-old body couldn't handle the force, and I crashed heavily to the floor in front of the entire family. The silence that followed was deafening. The children screamed my name. Teresa brought her hands to her mouth. Anthony remained motionless, but I saw something in his eyes that chilled me to the bone. Satisfaction. From the floor, hurt and humiliated, I heard the words that would change everything forever. "This seat belongs to my father-in-law. Get out." In the moment as I lay on the cold tile floor, something inside me broke. Not just my dignity, but something much deeper. The image I had of my son, the unconditional love I felt for him, crumbled like a house of cards. The kids helped me up, their faces filled with confusion and pain. "Are you okay, Grandpa?" Isabel whispered with tears in her eyes. "I'm fine, sweetie," I lied, stroking her hair. But inside, a storm had begun to brew. David had already taken his seat at the table as if nothing had happened. Anthony occupied my chair without a word. Teresa served dinner with nervous movements, avoiding my gaze. I sat in a side chair like a second-ass guest in what used to be my own family. During the entire dinner, I watched how David spoke to Anthony with a respect he had never shown me. I watched how Teresa hung on every word of the man who now sat in my place. I watched how my grandchildren looked at me with sadness, unable to understand why their father had humiliated their grandfather. And as I watched, I made a decision that would change our lives forever. The dinner proceeded in a tense atmosphere that felt as thick as smoke. Every bite tasted like betrayal. Every laugh shared between David and Anthony pierced my soul like sharp daggers. My grandkids tried to fill the silence with innocent comments about their schoolwork. But even they could sense that something fundamental had changed in our family dynamic. "Jacob got straight A's this semester," I commented, trying to reclaim some normalcy amidst the emotional chaos boiling inside me. "Oh, right," David replied without even looking at me, completely focused on cutting the meat he was serving to Anthony. "Mr. Fermor is the lamb cooked to your liking." It was as if I had become invisible. For 42 years I had raised this man. I had taught him values, principles, given him everything I had and more. And now he was treating me like an annoying stranger at his own table. When we finished dinner, I excused myself discreetly. "I'm just going to the restroom for a moment." No one replied. They didn't even look up from their glasses of brandy and their business conversations, in which I, the man who had built the family company from nothing, was not included. I walked to the bathroom with slow steps, but my mind was already racing at top speed. Once inside, I locked the door and looked at myself in the mirror. The man staring back at me had reined eyes not from tears, but from a cold anger that was beginning to crystallize into pure determination. I took out my cell phone and started dialing numbers I knew by heart. The first call was to Edward Roberts, my personal lawyer for 25 years. His sleepy voice answered on the fourth ring. "Michael, it's Christmas Eve." "What's the emergency, Edward? I need you to prepare documents first thing tomorrow morning to revoke all the powers of attorney David has in the company. All of them, without exception." There was a long pause. Edward knew my business structure perfectly. "Michael, are you sure that would mean I know exactly what it means?" "I also want you to cancel every financial guarantee I've co-signed for him. The house, the car, the corporate credit cards, everything. What happened? My son just showed me who he really is, and I'm about to show him who I am." The second call was to Linda Vance, my accountant and CFO. She also knew every financial move the family made. "Linda, I'm sorry to bother you on a holiday. I need you to freeze all joint accounts with David first thing in the morning. Also, suspend his salary and executive benefits. Is there a legal problem, Mr. Miller? No, Linda? I'm just taking back control of what belongs to me." The third call was the most important. I dialed the number of Robert Pfizer, my second in command. At the company, a loyal man who had been with me since the beginning. "Robert, forgive the hour. Could you go to the office early tomorrow morning? I need you to remove all of David's personal belongings from his office." "Are you firing him, boss? He is no longer the CEO. You will take his position starting tomorrow. Prepare an immediate termination letter. Justifiable cause. Loss of confidence. Understood, Mr. Miller. Anything else?" "Yes." Place a note on his desk that says, "This office is not for you." I want him to understand the message perfectly. After the calls, I stayed in the bathroom for a few more minutes, mentally organizing every move I would make. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was seeking justice. For decades, I had built a business empire. I had sacrificed personal time. I had worked 18-hour days to give my family a comfortable life. And my own son had just shown me that all that effort wasn't even worth his basic respect. I returned to the dining room with a calm smile that hid the storm raging inside me. The conversation continued without me as if I had never existed. The European markets are very volatile, Anthony commented, gesturing with his cognac glass. Exactly, David agreed enthusiastically. That's why we believe a merger between our companies could be very beneficial. Those words hit me like a lightning bolt. A merger. They were planning to merge my company, my life's work with Anoni's, without even consulting me. A merger, I asked in a controlled voice. David looked at me as if he'd forgotten I was still there. Oh yeah, Dad. Mr. Moore and I have been discussing expansion possibilities for my company. Well, technically, I'm the CEO, he replied with an arrogant smirk I had never seen on his face. Technically, I repeated slowly, savoring each syllable. I see. Anthony intervened with his slow, calculating voice. Michael, you understand that modern business requires fresh approaches. David has innovative ideas. I'm sure he does. I replied, maintaining my composure, while mentally noting every word for the coming reckoning. The kids had gone up to their rooms after dessert, oblivious to the drama unfolding among the adults. Teresa was clearing the plates with mechanical movements, clearly uncomfortable, but not daring to interfere in the men's conversation. I think it's time for me to leave, I finally announced, getting up from the side chair where I had been exiled. Sure, Dad, get some rest, David replied without looking up from his cigar. He didn't even bother to walk me to the door. It was Jacob who came running down the stairs when he heard I was leaving. Are you leaving already, Grandpa? I thought you were staying later like you always do. No, kiddo. I have important things to do tonight. Are you upset about what happened at dinner? My grandson's question pierced my heart. Even a teenager had sensed the injustice of the situation. I'm not upset, Jacob. I'm disappointed. But sometimes disappointments teach us important truths. I don't understand. You will soon, son. I love you very much. Always remember that. I left that house feeling strangely liberated. The cold December air filled my lungs as I walked to my car. In the driver's seat before starting the engine, I took out my phone again. I had one last call to make. Law offices of Lopez. This is Michael Miller. Forgive me for bothering you on Christmas Eve, but I need to change my will first thing tomorrow. Yes, it's urgent. Very urgent. As I drove home, a smile formed on my face. For the first time all night, David had played his hand believing he was in control. But he had forgotten one fundamental detail. I was the one who built the game board, and tomorrow he would discover the real rules. I arrived home around midnight, but sleep was the last thing on my mind. While the rest of Chicago celebrated Christmas, I was preparing for the most important battle of my life. I turned on all the lights in my study and spread out every legal document I had accumulated over 4 decades of work on my oak desk. The first task was to meticulously review the company's bylaws. I needed to confirm something I suspected. David never had any actual stock ownership in the company. He was CEO by my appointment, not by right. All his authority depended on my will, and that will had just changed radically. While looking through folders and files, my phone rang. It was Linda, my accountant. Mr. Miller, I've been reviewing the account since we spoke. There's something you need to know urgently. Tell me, Linda. David has been using the company's financial guarantees for personal expenses far greater than we imagined. The apartment where he lives has a $600,000 mortgage co-signed by you. His sports car, $120,000. The corporate credit cards, Mr. Miller. He owes over $200,000 in personal purchases. The information hit me like an anvil. Is he behind on any payments several? Without your guarantees, he will be in immediate default. The banks will begin foreclosure and repossession procedures tomorrow morning if the guarantees are gone. Perfect. Cancel all the guarantees at dawn. Are you absolutely sure this will ruin his financial situation? Linda, my son just ruined something much more valuable. Our relationship. Now he will learn about consequences. After hanging up, I continued reviewing documents until I found what I was looking for. David's employment contracts. My company, Miller Construction, Inc., paid him a salary of $8,000 a month, plus benefits that included a company car, private health insurance, an expense account, and annual profit sharing. All of that would disappear in a few hours. At 3 in the morning, I called Robert. Boss, I haven't been able to sleep thinking about what you asked me. Do you really want me to do this, Robert? Do you trust my judgment after all these years? Of course, Mr. Miller. You pulled me out of poverty and gave me opportunities I never dreamed of. Then trust me now. David has crossed a line of no return. Go to the office early, remove his personal belongings, and place that note exactly as I told you. Understood. What if he arrives while I'm doing it even better? I want him to see how it feels when someone takes his place. At 4 in the morning, I reviewed the financial statements from the last 5 years. What I discovered filled me with a mixture of anger and disappointment. David had been diverting small amounts of money to personal accounts for years. Nothing illegal, but ethically reprehensible. He had used company contacts to secure private contracts. He had collected commissions for recommending suppliers without informing me. My son hadn't just disrespected me that night. He had been systematically betraying my trust for years. At 5 in the morning, I called my lawyer, Edward. Michael, I've been preparing the documents you requested, but I must warn you, this will have immediate legal consequences. David could sue you for wrongful termination. Edward may have proof of misuse of funds, improper use of corporate resources, and undeclared conflicts of interest. Do you think he wants to go to court, I understand? The documents will be ready at €8 sharp. Perfect. Also prepare the papers to transfer ownership of the Lakeshore Drive apartment that's in David's name. It was a wedding gift, but it's registered as a family loan. I want it back. The apartment where he currently lives. Exactly. Let him learn to pay rent like any normal person. At 6 in the morning while making coffee, I received a text message from Isabel, my granddaughter. Grandpa Dad is very nervous. He's been on the phone all night. Is everything okay? I replied, Everything will be fine, sweetie. Your grandpa loves you very much. At 7 in the morning, it was time to make the most satisfying call of the entire operation. Chase Bank, this is Michael Miller. I need to immediately cancel all financial guarantees I've co-signed for David M. Miller. Yes, all of them. Mortgage loans, credit cards, everything. Mr. Miller, that will mean the payments will be called in immediately against the primary debtor. I'm perfectly aware. Proceed. Very well. The cancellation documents will be processed within the hour. Should I inform Mr. Miller that won't be necessary? He'll find out very soon. At 8 in the morning, Edward arrived at my house with all the prepared documents. I signed each paper with steely determination. Cancellation of executive powers, revocation of banking authority, immediate termination of directorial duties, recovery of AMU assets provided as a family loan. Michael, once you sign this, there's no going back. Edward, a few hours ago, my son pushed me to the floor in front of my grandchildren to give my seat to another man. Do you think there's any going back? I signed the last document at 8:30 a.m. At 9:00, I called Robert to confirm that everything was ready at the office. Boss, I've already removed all his things. His computer, his diplomas, even the plant he had by the window. It's all in boxes in the storage room. And the note placed exactly in the center of his desk, just as you asked. Perfect. When he arrives, let him in normally. Don't explain anything. Let him discover the situation for himself. At 9:30, I received confirmation from Linda. Mr. Miller, all guarantees have been officially canceled. The banks will begin execution proceedings starting at 1000 a.m. At 5 minutes to 10, I put on my best suit. Today was no ordinary day. It was the day David M. Miller would discover what the word consequences truly meant. I poured myself one last cup of coffee and watched the sun rise from my study window. After a sleepless night, I felt strangely energized. There was no trace of the sadness or pain from a few hours before, only a crystal clear clarity about what needed to be done. My phone was on silent, but I could see the notifications piling up on the screen. Messages, missed calls, emails. The storm had begun. David was about to wake up to the worst day of his life, and I would be waiting to see his reaction when he finally understood that actions have consequences and that underestimating his father had been the costliest mistake of his existence. The war had begun, and I held all the weapons. David woke up that morning, December 25th, with a strange feeling in his stomach. It wasn't a hangover from the previous night's brandy, but something deeper, as if his subconscious had picked up on danger signals his conscious mind hadn't yet processed. Teresa was already up, mechanically making breakfast for the kids. The atmosphere in the house felt tense, charged with an invisible electricity that no one mentioned but everyone felt. "Did you sleep well?" Teresa asked without looking at him, focused on pouring orange juice. "Not really," David replied, checking his phone. He had 3 missed calls from unknown numbers, probably telemarketers taking advantage of the holidays. What he didn't know was that at that very moment, as he ate breakfast peacefully, several Chicago banks had already initiated their collateral recovery protocols. The banking systems had automatically processed the cancellation of the guarantees in the early hours of the morning. At 10:15 a.m., David received the first real call. "Mr. Miller, this is Monica Castillo from Bank of America. We need you to contact us urgently regarding your mortgage." "What's wrong?" "My mortgage is completely up to date." "Sir, the primary guarantee on your loan was canceled this morning. Without that guarantee, the loan is automatically in a state of immediate demand for payment." David felt a rush of ice-cold water. "What guarantee? What are you talking about?" "The guarantee signed by Mr. Michael Miller. Without it, you must pay the full debt or we will proceed with foreclosure." The call ended, and David stood there with the phone in his hand, trying to process the information. Before he could fully react, it rang again. "Mr. David Miller, Wells Fargo Risk Department. Your corporate line of credit has been suspended due to cancellation of guarantees. You must report to our offices immediately." He hung up and the phone immediately rang again. "Citibank, your business credit card has been blocked." Another incoming call. "Chase Bank initiating preventive asset seizure proceedings." And another U.S. bank, immediate execution of. In 15 minutes, David received exactly 47 calls from different banks, insurance companies, car dealerships, and corporate suppliers. His financial world was crumbling in real time while he stood in his kitchen, still in his pajamas. Teresa watched the scene with growing horror. "What is happening, David? Why so many calls I don't know?" He mumbled, but deep down a terrible suspicion was starting to form. His father's words from the night before echoed in his memory. "Technically, I'm the CEO." At 11:00 a.m., he decided to go to the company immediately. He needed to understand what was happening, and more importantly, he needed access to corporate resources to handle this unexpected crisis. He drove his BMW 7 Series through the empty Christmas streets of Chicago, not knowing it would be one of the last times he'd be behind the wheel of that car. The dealership had already received orders to repossess it for non-payment of the lease. He arrived at the Miller Construction Building at 11:30. The security guard greeted him, normally showing no sign that anything had changed. David took the elevator to the fifth floor where his CEO office was located. As he stepped out of the elevator, he noticed something strange. Robert Pfizer was in his office sitting behind his desk, reviewing documents that clearly belonged to the executive files. "Robert, what are you doing in my office?" Robert looked up with an expression that was uncomfortable but firm. "Good morning, David." Well, this isn't your office anymore." "What do you mean it's not my office?" "What are you talking about? Read the letter on the desk." David walked over and saw it placed exactly in the center of the wooden surface. A handwritten note in his father's unmistakable script. "This office is not for you." The words hit him like physical blows. It was the same phrase he had used the night before that now turned against him. He felt his knees go weak. "Robert, this has to be a joke." "It's not a joke, David. Mr. Miller appointed me CEO this morning. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal items from the storage room and leave the building. This is impossible. I am the CEO. I've spent years building this company with my father. Not anymore, David." The termination papers are officially filed, justifiable cause, loss of confidence, and conflict of interest. David felt the world spin around him. He pulled out his phone to call his father. But before he could dial, Robert handed him a sealed envelope. "Mr. Miller asked me to give you this." With trembling hands, David opened the envelope. Inside was a typed letter on company letterhead. "David, the consequences of our actions sometimes arrive when we least expect them. Last night you showed me that my place in your life no longer exists. Today I'm showing you that your place in my company doesn't either. You have until noon to vacate any property that is in my name. The Lakeshore Drive apartment, the car, everything. You will learn to live on your own resources as you should have years ago. Do not look for me. Do not call me. Do not try to use intermediaries. This decision is final and irrevocable. Your father, who no longer recognizes you, Michael Miller." David read the letter 3 times before the words fully penetrated his understanding. It wasn't just the job, it was everything: his home, his car, his lifestyle, his financial security. It had all vanished in a single morning. "Robert, you have to help me. You've known my father for years. This is just some temporary madness. David, I saw what you did to him last night. My own wife was disgusted when I told her. Mr. Miller is the fairest man I know, but also the most determined. When he makes a decision, there's no going back. But I'm his son, his only son. You were his son. Last night you chose to be something else." David walked out of the corporate building like a sleepwalker. In the parking lot, he found a tow truck hooking up his BMW. The driver showed him a court order for repossession due to non-payment. Wait, there must be a mistake. "No mistake, sir. The lease is in default and has no guarantor. The vehicle is being repossessed immediately." David had to walk to the nearest subway station, something he hadn't done in years. During the ride home, his phone never stopped ringing. Banks, creditors, suppliers, all demanding immediate payment. When he finally arrived at his apartment, he found Teresa crying on the sofa holding a legal notice. "David, we have 24 hours to leave the house. They're going to foreclose on the mortgage. What your father canceled all the guarantees. We owe $600,000 that we don't have." David sank into a chair completely defeated. In less than 12 hours, he had lost his job, his car, his home, and his financial stability. And worst of all, he had lost his father. The words he had spoken the night before now echoed like a curse. "This seat belongs to my father-in-law. Get out." Now he was the one who was out of everything. David spent the next 2 hours trying to process the sheer scale of the disaster that had just consumed his life. Teresa alternated between hysterical crying and bitter reproaches as she desperately packed their most valuable belongings before the eviction. "This is your fault," she screamed, stuffing jewelry into a suitcase. "How could you be so stupid, shoving your own father in front of the children?" "Teresa, calm down. This can be fixed. I just need to talk to him. Talk David. They've taken everything from us, the house, the car, your job. What are we going to tell my parents? That question hit David like a slap. Anthony Moore, his father-in-law, had been an eyewitness to the humiliation he had inflicted on Michael. If there was one thing Anthony valued above all else, it was family respect and patriarchal dignity. David picked up his phone with trembling hands and dialed his father-in-law's number. He needed support, an ally, someone to intercede for him. "Anthony, it's David. I need to talk to you urgently." The voice that answered was as cold as winter ice. "David, I was expecting your call." "Anthony, something terrible has happened. My father has lost his mind. He's taken everything from me over a meaningless family argument. I need your help." There was a long, blood-chilling silence. A meaningless argument. "David, did you hear what you just said?" "Well, it was just a misunderstanding. You know how these things are between fathers and sons?" "No, David. I don't know, because I would never have disrespected my father. The way you disrespected yours last night." David felt panic begin to grip him. "Anthony, please. Teresa and the children need stability. I know you can understand. What I understand perfectly is that I witnessed a 42-year-old man publicly humiliate the father who gave him everything. I saw you push Michael to the floor to give me a seat that I never asked for nor wanted. I thought you would appreciate the gesture of respect. Respect, David. You don't build respect by disrespecting others, especially not your own father." David could hear the growing contempt in Anoni's voice. His last resort was vanishing before his eyes. "Anthony, we're family. Teresa is your daughter. The kids are your grandchildren." "Exactly. And for that very reason, I cannot allow my grandchildren to grow up thinking that kind of behavior is acceptable. Teresa and the children will always have my support. But you, David, have shown that you are someone who cannot be trusted." "What do you mean?" "I mean that any man capable of betraying his own father is capable of betraying anyone. There will be no financial support from me, no job in my companies, no shelter in my home." David felt his legs give way. "You can't be serious. I have never been more serious in my life. Furthermore, I have decided to contact Michael to offer him a personal apology for having been an unwilling witness to your deplorable behavior. You're going to apologize to him." Of course, a man of his caliber did not deserve that humiliation, especially in front of his family, and I'm also going to offer him a business partnership. Anoni's words struck David like hammer blows. Not only had he lost his father-in-law's support, but now Anthony was aligning himself directly with his father. "Anthony, please reconsider." "I have reconsidered, David, and my conclusion is clear. Michael Miller is the kind of man I want to do business with." "You are not." The line went dead, leaving David with the silent phone in his hand. Teresa had heard the entire conversation from the doorway. All the color had drained from her face. "My father isn't going to help us?" she whispered. "No." "What are we going to do? David, where are we going to live? The kids have school. I have my job. I don't know, Teresa. I just don't know." At that moment, Jacob and Isabel came down the stairs, alerted by the raised voices and the chaos of suitcases and boxes all over the house. "What's going on?" Jacob asked with the worry of a teenager who senses his world is changing. "Why is Mom crying?" Isabel added in a small voice. David looked at his children and felt a pang of shame deeper than anything he had experienced so far. How was he going to explain to them that because of his pride and stupidity, their entire family's stability had disappeared? "Kids, we need to talk." Teresa began, her voice breaking. "Is it because of what happened last night with Grandpa?" Jacob asked directly. The question showed that even the teenagers had understood the gravity of what happened better than David himself. "Yes, son, it is." "Dad, why did you push Grandpa?" Isabel asked, tears in her eyes. He looked so sad. David couldn't answer. The words were stuck in his throat. Grandpa loves us so much, Isabel continued. He always brings us gifts and tells us stories. Why were you mean to him? I thought you thought what Dad Jacob insisted. Because it looked like you hated him. I don't hate your grandfather. But you treated him like you did. Jacob retorted with a maturity that broke his heart. And now he must hate us too. No, son. He loves you. He would never hurt you. Then why can't we stay in our house? Why is Mom packing everything? David sank onto the sofa, utterly defeated. His own children were judging him, and they were right to do so. Because Dad made a very big mistake, he finally admitted. A mistake that's going to change our lives. Can you say sorry to Grandpa? Isabel asked, with the innocence of a child who still believes adult problems can be solved with a sincere apology. It's too late for that, sweetie. Teresa came over and sat next to him. For the first time all day, her voice held not reproach, but a deep sadness. David, I need you to understand something. The kids and I are moving in with my parents. I can't stay with you after this. I can't be with someone who is capable of humiliating his own father like that. Teresa, we're a family. No, David. A family is built on respect and values. You proved last night that you have neither. David looked at his wife, his children, the suitcases, the eviction notice on the table. In 24 hours, he had destroyed his entire life over a moment of stupid arrogance. And the worst part was his father was right. He had brought this all on himself. The consequences had arrived, and they were far more devastating than he could have ever imagined. The afternoon of December 25th became the longest and most painful of David's life. While Teresa meticulously packed the children's belongings, he desperately tried to find a solution to his catastrophic financial situation. His bank accounts had been preventively frozen due to outstanding debts. His primary credit card was blocked. The ATM denied him even the $50 he tried to withdraw from his personal account. He had only $300 cash in his wallet, all that was left of his former financial life. Where are you going to sleep tonight? Teresa asked him as she closed the last of the kids' suitcases. I don't know. Maybe some cheap hotel until I can get myself together. David, look at me. Teresa stopped and confronted him directly. Do you really think you can get yourself together after this? Your father is not someone who acts on impulse. This was calculated to be permanent. He's my father, Teresa. Eventually, he'll have to forgive me. Like you forgave him when he made mistakes. Oh, wait. He never made mistakes with you. He was always perfect, generous, understanding, and this is how you repay him. Teresa's words cut deeper than any external reproach because they held an undeniable truth. Michael had been an exemplary father, and David had responded with ingratitude and contempt. At 6 p.m., the moving truck Teresa had hired arrived to transport their belongings to her parents' house. The children watched their toys and furniture being moved with a quiet sadness that was heartbreaking. Is Dad coming with us? Isabel asked as they loaded her pink bicycle. No, sweetie. Dad has to fix some problems first. When is he going to fix them? Teresa looked at David with an expression that held years of accumulated disappointment. We don't know, Isabel. Jacob, more direct like a typical teenager, confronted his father bluntly. Dad, are you going to be homeless because of what you did to Grandpa? It's more complicated than that, son. Doesn't seem complicated to me. You were mean to him, and now he's being mean to you. It's like at school, if you hit someone, you get punished. The brutal simplicity of Jacob's observation showed that even a teenager understood the logic of cause and effect better than David had understood the consequences of his actions. At 7:00 p.m., Teresa finished loading all of her and the children's things. The house, which just hours before had been their family home, now seemed like an empty shell with only the basic furniture that belonged to the property. David, I need you to sign these papers. Teresa handed him a folder with legal documents she had prepared while he was chasing impossible financial solutions. What are they? Temporary separation of vast assets and provisional custody of the children. My lawyer drew them up this afternoon. David felt a dagger twist in his stomach. You already went to a lawyer. Of course. Did you think I was going to wait around and see how far you'd fall? I have to protect the children. Teresa, this is extreme. I just need time to what David, find another rich father you can betray. Find another father-in-law whose favor you can win by humiliating your family. That's not fair. You know what's not fair? That my children had to watch their father behave like a savage towards their grandfather. You know what's not fair? That after 15 years of marriage, I had discovered my husband is capable of such cruelty. David signed the papers with trembling hands. He had no choice. Without financial resources, a job, or a home, he couldn't offer stability to anyone. The children can visit you on weekends when you have a suitable place to host them, Teresa informed him as she put the signed documents away. When will that be? When you prove you're a trustworthy person again, if you ever manage that. At 8 p.m., David found himself alone in an empty house that was no longer his, with $300 in cash and a suitcase of basic clothes. The rest of his belongings were in boxes in the company's storage room under Robert's custody. He walked out onto the street and wandered aimlessly through the Christmas-lit avenues of Chicago. Families strolled happily. Children ran with new toys. Couples hugged against the winter cold. Everyone seemed to have a home to return to except him. He found a cheap hotel near Union Station where he could pay for a room for 3 nights for $200. He had $100 left for food and transport. The room was small with a single bed, a tiny bathroom, and a window overlooking a dark alley. He sat on the bed and contemplated the magnitude of his personal destruction. His phone rang. It was an unknown number. David Miller. Yes. This is Mark Delgado from the law firm Delgado and Associates. Your father has retained me to officially notify you that any attempt at direct or indirect contact with him will be considered harassment. What Mr. Miller has been very clear, he does not wish to receive calls, messages, visits, or intermediaries from you. Any violation of this instruction will result in a court-ordered restraining order. He's my father. Mr. Miller legally, Mr. Michael Miller, has the right to decide who he maintains a relationship with. His decision is final. The call ended, leaving David with the final understanding that his father had not only punished him financially, but had completely cut off any possibility of reconciliation. He looked at himself in the hotel bathroom mirror. The man staring back looked like he had aged 10 years in one day. Deep, dark circles, an unshaven face, wrinkled clothes. He looked exactly like what he was, someone who had lost everything because of his own stupidity. That night, trying to sleep in an unfamiliar bed, David reflected on the 24 hours that had completely changed his existence. Just 2 days ago, he was the CEO of a thriving company, lived in a luxury apartment, drove a sports car, had a stable family, and the respect of his community. Now he was a man with no home, no job, no family, no resources, and no foreseeable future. And all for a moment of arrogance that lasted less than 30 seconds. The words he had spoken echoed in his mind like a curse. This seat belongs to my father-in-law. Get out. Now he was the one who was out of everything. 3 days after the Christmas disaster, as David tried to process his new reality in the tiny hotel room, he received an unexpected call that completely changed his perspective. Dad. It was Jacob's voice, trembling and emotional. Son, how are you? How did you get my number? I'm using Mom's phone. Dad, I need to tell you something important. Grandpa came to see us. David's heart raced. Michael went to your maternal grandparents' house. Yeah. Yesterday afternoon, Mom wasn't there. She'd gone out shopping. Grandpa Anthony welcomed him into the main living room, like he was a very important guest. What happened, Dad? I'd never seen Grandpa Michael look so sad, but he also looked different, stronger. You know, like when he makes big decisions at his company. David closed his eyes, imagining the scene his father handling the situation with the dignity that had always defined him. Go on, son. He asked Isabel and me to sit with him. He explained that what happened with you had nothing to do with us, that he loved us just the same as always. What else did he say? He said that sometimes adults make decisions that have very serious consequences, but that grandchildren aren't responsible for their parents' choices. Michael's words showed the kind of man he was. Even in his pain and disappointment, he was protecting the children from being dragged into the adult conflict. Isabel asked him if he was mad at us. Jacob continued, and he told her he could never be mad at us because we hadn't done anything wrong. How did your mom react when she got back? She got really nervous. I think she was afraid Grandpa Michael would blame her for what you did, but he was very polite to her. He told her he completely understood her decision to separate from you. David felt another stab of pain. His father hadn't just cut him off. He was validating the decisions of those who were abandoning him. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course, Jacob. Why did you do it? Why were you so cruel to Grandpa? The direct question from his 15-year-old son forced him to confront a truth he had been avoiding. There was no valid excuse for his behavior. Son, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought showing respect to Grandpa Anthony was important. But Dad, showing respect to one person doesn't mean you disrespect another. I learned that when I was 8. The simple wisdom of his teenage son hit him like a revelation. An 8-year-old understood basic concepts of respect that he at 42 had completely ignored. You're right, Jacob. I made a terrible mistake. Can you fix it? I don't know, son. Your grandfather is very hurt, but you're hurt too. Right, Mom says you lost your job and the house. Yes, I lost a lot of things. Did you lose them? Or were they taken away as a punishment? Again, the brutal clarity of a teenager's perspective. Jacob understood perfectly that David's consequences were not accidents of fate, but direct results of his actions. They were taken away as a punishment, son, like when they take away my PlayStation when I misbehave. Exactly like that. And do you think you deserved it? David was silent for a long time. It was the first time anyone had asked him that question directly, and the first time he had honestly asked it of himself. Yes, Jacob. I think I deserved it. Then maybe Grandpa isn't being mean to you. Maybe he's being fair. His son's words cut deeper than all of Teresa's reproaches, all the financial humiliations, all the material losses. A teenager had articulated the fundamental truth he had refused to accept. Michael wasn't being vengeful. He was being just. Dad, are you still there? Yes, son. I'm here. Grandpa told us something else. He said we would have to choose if we wanted to have a relationship with him or with you, because he was never going to be in the same place as you again. What did you decide? We told him it wasn't fair to make us choose. That you were our father and he was our grandfather, and that we loved you both even if you had problems. How did he react? His eyes filled with tears. He hugged us really tight and said we were very wise children. Then he proposed something. What, that we could see him on Wednesday afternoons and Sunday mornings, but that we would never talk about you with him or about him with you like separate compartments. David felt a mix of relief and sadness. His father had found a way to maintain a relationship with his grandchildren without betraying his decision to cut ties with him. Did you agree? Yeah, but Dad, it's really weird. It's like having two different lives. I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry I put you in this situation. Are you going to try to fix things with him? I can't, Jacob. Your grandfather has made it very clear he wants nothing to do with me. You're not even going to try. How can I try if he won't even let me near him? I don't know, Dad. But Grandpa always says that difficult problems require creative solutions. After hanging up with Jacob, David sat on the hotel bed, processing the conversation. His children had managed to maintain a relationship with their grandfather, but at the cost of compartmentalizing their lives, and all because of his moment of arrogant stupidity. What struck him most was the emotional maturity the children had shown, a dramatic contrast to his own emotional immaturity at 42. That afternoon, walking the streets of Chicago, looking for job postings on his phone, David began to understand something fundamental. It wasn't just about getting back what he had lost. It was about becoming a person who deserved to get it back, and that he realized might be the most difficult challenge of his life. Because it was much easier to get back a job, a house, or a car than to regain the respect of a man you had completely betrayed. Especially when that man was your own father, and he had every reason in the world not to give you a second chance. 2 weeks after his life collapsed, David had nearly exhausted all his financial resources. The $100 left after paying for the hotel had evaporated on basic food and public transportation as he desperately searched for work all over the city. His resume, which used to open doors automatically because of his last name and family connections, was now systematically rejected. The construction industry in Chicago was a tight-knit circle where everyone knew everyone, and the news of his falling out with Michael Miller had spread like wildfire. "We're sorry, Mr. Miller, but we don't have any openings at the moment," they'd say in every office with polite smiles that hid the real message. No one wanted to hire the son who had betrayed Michael Miller. On the 4th of January, with no money left even for a hostel room, David was forced to swallow his pride in a way he had never imagined. He applied for a job at an industrial cleaning company that operated on the outskirts of Chicago. Previous cleaning experience asked Brenda Sanchez, the 45-year-old supervisor conducting the interview. "No, but I'm a fast learner and I urgently need to work." "Why does someone with your professional background want to work here? I see you were a CEO." David had prepared an answer that held a partial truth. "I had irreconcilable differences with my former business partner. I need to start over from scratch." Brenda studied him with shrewd eyes. She was a hardworking woman who had built her small business from nothing, and she recognized both desperation and genuine humility when she saw it. The work is hard, the hours are long, the salary is $200 a month. Night shift 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Are you sure you can handle it? Completely sure. You start tomorrow. Don't be late. Not once. Because there are 50 other people waiting for this job. That night, David worked until dawn cleaning corporate offices. His hands, accustomed to signing multi-million-dollar contracts, now handled mops and chemical cleaning products. His designer suits were replaced by blue uniforms with the Brenda's Cleaners Inc. logo. During those first weeks of night work, David experienced an unexpected psychological transformation. The forced humility of cleaning toilets and emptying trash cans made him reflect on concepts he had taken for granted his whole life. Dignity, honest work. The value of effort. His co-workers were immigrants, single mothers, college students, funding their studies, retirees, supplementing meager pensions. None of them knew his past story, and for the first time in years, David wasn't judged by his last name or family connections, but by his willingness to work. "Where are you from, David?" asked Miguel, a co-worker from Ecuador during their midnight break. "From here, from Chicago." "And what did you do before this?" "I worked in construction administrative stuff." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. David had developed the skill of navigating conversations without fully revealing his past. Meanwhile, through controlled interactions with his children, David learned indirectly about his father's new reality. Jacob and Isabel would casually mention details during their weekly phone calls that painted a picture of a business transformation. "Grandpa Michael has a new partner," Isabel commented during one of their calls. "A new partner? Yeah, Grandpa Anthony. They're working on big projects together now. Mom says they're going to build really tall buildings." The irony was devastating. His father-in-law, the very man he had tried to impress by humiliating his father, was now Michael's business partner. The alliance David had tried to force had materialized, but had completely excluded him. "Do they see each other often?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual. "Almost every day. Sometimes they pick us up from school together. They laugh a lot when they talk about their projects." David hung up that call feeling more alone than ever. He hadn't just lost his father, he had inadvertently catalyzed a friendship and business partnership between Michael and Anthony that probably never would have existed without his destructive intervention. A month after starting the cleaning job, David had developed a routine that provided basic, though precarious, stability. He shared a room in a student apartment in the Wicker Park neighborhood, paying $400 a month in rent. His expenses were limited to basic food, public transport, and phone calls to his children. The physical transformation was obvious. He had lost weight due to the combination of intense physical labor and a simple diet. His clothes were simple, practical, cheap. His hands, once soft from office work, were now calloused from handling cleaning tools. But the psychological transformation was deeper. The experience of losing everything had forced him to reevaluate what truly constituted personal value and dignity. For the first time in his adult life, David was surviving solely on his own effort with no family safety nets or privileged connections. One night, while cleaning the offices of the Willis Tower, he paused in front of a window that offered a panoramic view of Chicago. The city spread out before him, illuminated and prosperous, full of opportunities and dreams. He remembered the times he had looked at similar views from his old executive office when he believed his success was the result of his own talent and merit. Now he understood it had been the result of inherited privilege and gifted opportunities. The difference was that now every dollar he earned represented real sweat, genuine effort, and learned humility. For the first time since Christmas night, David began to feel something like hope. Not the hope of getting his old life back, but the hope of building something new and authentic from the ground up. Something that could make even a man like Michael Miller proud, even if that man was no longer there to see it. March had arrived in Chicago with the promise of spring, and David had been working at the cleaning company for 3 months. His life had settled into a simple but dignified routine. Working at night, sleeping in the morning, looking for professional growth opportunities in the afternoon, and maintaining regular contact with his children through carefully scheduled phone calls. It was during one of those afternoons of job searching that something happened that would completely change his perspective on the family situation. David had left a failed interview at a small renovation company and decided to walk through Lincoln Park to clear his head before returning to his shared room. The fresh air and the first green buds on the trees provided a moment of peace amidst his difficult circumstances. As he walked along the path, he saw a scene that left him completely frozen. On a bench near the pond, Michael and Anthony were sitting talking animatedly, surrounded by architectural plans spread out on a folding table. Both men looked relaxed, smiling, clearly enjoying their professional collaboration. What struck David most was not seeing them together, but observing the visible transformation in his father. Michael looked rejuvenated, energetic, with a vitality David didn't remember seeing in years. His gestures were lively as he pointed out details on the plans. His eyes shone with genuine enthusiasm. From his hiding spot behind a group of tourists, David overheard fragments of the conversation. The main structure can support 2 additional floors without any problem. Michael was saying, tracing lines on the plans with a red pencil. Brilliant, Michael. Your experience in deep foundations is exactly what we needed for this project. Anthony working with you has been one of the best decisions of my career. We should have done this years ago. I completely agree. You know what, I think this partnership is going to be far more successful than either of us ever imagined. David felt a simultaneous pang of pain and recognition. His father had found not only a business partner, but seemingly a genuine friend in Anthony. The camaraderie between the two men was evident and natural. What was most painful for David was realizing that his father looked happier and more fulfilled than he had in years. Losing his son hadn't destroyed him. It had liberated him to form more authentic and satisfying relationships. As he watched the scene, David remembered the words Anthony had said to him on the phone weeks ago. "Michael Miller is the kind of man I want to do business with." Now he understood the full meaning of that statement. It wasn't just about professional competition or financial convenience. It was about mutual respect between men of similar integrity. "How are the grandkids?" Anthony asked as he rolled up one of the plans. "Jacob and Isabel are extraordinary, smart, resilient, mature for their age. They've handled this whole family situation with a wisdom that amazes me." "That's the result of the upbringing you gave them all these years, Michael. I hope so. They aren't to blame for their father's decisions." David felt tears sting his eyes. His father was still protecting and loving his grandchildren, even while maintaining his firm position regarding him. "Do you ever feel tempted to reconcile with David?" Anthony asked with genuine curiosity. Michael was silent for a long moment, contemplating the calm waters of the pond. "Anthony, for 42 years I thought I knew my son. I thought I had raised a man with values, principles, respect for family. On Christmas night I discovered I was completely wrong. People can change Michael. They can. But real change requires real consequences. If I forgive him easily, what does he learn? What lesson do my grandchildren receive about acceptable behavior?" I see your point. It's not about punishing him forever. It's about him understanding the value of what he destroyed. Maybe one day he'll show that he's truly learned. But that day hasn't come yet. David walked away from the park undetected, but his father's words echoed in his mind for days. Michael wasn't being inflexible out of cruelty, but out of deep-seated educational principles. That night, as he cleaned offices in the financial district, David reflected on the conversation he had overheard. His father was waiting for evidence of genuine growth, not just desperate apologies or emotional pleas. The question he asked himself was, had he really grown? Or was he just surviving until he could get his old status back? Over the next few weeks, David began to honestly assess his transformation process. Was he learning authentic humility, or just patiently waiting for the storm to pass? The answer made him uncomfortable. Part of him was still secretly hoping his father would eventually give in and forgive him, allowing him to return to some version of his former life. But the conversation in the park had shown him something crucial. Michael had moved on. He wasn't waiting for David to come back. He had built a new, prosperous, and satisfying reality without him. If David wanted any kind of future reconciliation, he would have to demonstrate genuine transformation, not just suffer temporary consequences, and that he realized would require much more time, effort, and personal growth than he had imagined. The real question was no longer when his father would forgive him, but when he would become someone worthy of forgiveness. That realization marked the beginning of a completely different phase in his personal recovery process. December had returned to Chicago with its characteristic cold and Christmas lights, marking exactly 1 year since the night that had destroyed David's life. As he walked through the illuminated streets after finishing his night cleaning shift, he stopped in front of decorated storefronts with happy family scenes that painfully reminded him of what he had lost. His transformation over these 12 months had been radical. He was no longer the arrogant, privileged man who had pushed his father to the ground. The physical labor, financial hardship, and forced solitude had sculpted a completely different version of himself. His callous hands, simple clothes, and face weathered by nights of hard work told the story of a humility learned through suffering. Brenda, his supervisor at the cleaning company, had noticed his evolution and offered him additional responsibilities. "David, I want you to coordinate the night team for the new contract at the Keogh Towers." She had announced the week before, "Your work has been impeccable all year, and the client specifically requested you be assigned to their facilities." The pay raise to $1,800 a month had allowed him to move into a small but private apartment in a working-class neighborhood. It wasn't luxury, but it was dignity. He had bought second-hand furniture, modestly decorated the walls with photos of his children, and created a humble but authentic home. His weekly calls with Jacob and Isabel had become the brightest spot in his existence. The children had grown during that year, and their conversations reflected an emotional maturity that constantly amazed him. "Dad, are you really okay?" Isabel had asked during their last phone call. "Your voice sounds different." Calmer. Calmer? Yeah. Before you always sounded like you were rushing to some important place. Now you sound like you're exactly where you want to be. His 13-year-old daughter's observation had struck him deeply. She was right. For the first time in decades, David wasn't constantly chasing the next achievement, the next promotion, the next material acquisition. "You know what, sweetie, I think you're right. Are you going to try to talk to Grandpa Michael someday?" "I don't know, Isabel. That decision isn't just up to me. But would you like to?" David had reflected carefully before answering. "I'd like for him to see that I've changed. Not to get back what I lost, but so he would know that his son finally learned the lessons he tried to teach me my whole life." On Christmas Eve, David worked his usual shift in the corporate offices of the financial district. As he cleaned the executive floor of one of Chicago's most prestigious skyscrapers, he paused in front of the windows that offered a panoramic view of the city lit up for the holidays. A year ago, he had been at a luxury dinner surrounded by family with every imaginable material comfort. And he had been profoundly unhappy without knowing it. Empty of authentic purpose, dependent on external validation to feel his own worth. Now he was alone in an empty office at 3:00 a.m., working for a modest salary, living in a small apartment. But he was experiencing an inner peace he had never known during his years of privilege. His phone vibrated with a text message from Jacob. "Dad, Grandpa Michael asked about you today." David felt his heart race. It was the first time in 12 months he had received any indication that his father had mentioned his existence. He replied immediately, "What did he ask?" "He asked if we knew how you were doing. If you had a job, if you had a place to live." Isabel and I told him, "You seem to be doing okay, but we didn't know details because you didn't want to worry us." How did he react? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I hope he's learning what he needs to learn." David read the message 3 times. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't an invitation to return, but it wasn't total indifference either. It was cautious hope. That night after finishing his work, David walked to the Fourth Presbyterian Church, which remained open for late-night Christmas services. He hadn't been particularly religious in his former life, but the solitude and reflection of the past year had brought him closer to spirituality. He sat in one of the back pews and contemplated the illuminated altar. For the first time since that fateful Christmas night, David felt he had something genuine to be thankful for. He hadn't recovered his fortune, his social status, his marriage, or his family relationship. But he had found something he hadn't known he'd lost: authentic self-respect. The man who had pushed his father to the floor had been rich in material goods but poor in character. The man who now cleaned offices at night had lost the possessions but gained personal dignity. As he left the church at dawn, David made a decision he had been considering for weeks. He would not try to contact his father directly respecting the established legal boundaries, but he would write a letter. Not a letter asking for forgiveness or pleading for reconciliation, but a letter of gratitude thanking him for the lessons learned, acknowledging the justice of the consequences he received, and informing him of the personal growth he had achieved. A letter that Michael could read or ignore, but that David needed to write to complete his process of inner transformation, because he had learned that true maturity wasn't about getting what you want, but about becoming who you are meant to be. And for the first time in his adult life, David was proud of who he was becoming. The letter David wrote during the early hours of Christmas Day became the most important document of his life. It wasn't written impulsively, but after days of careful reflection, multiple drafts, and a brutal honesty with himself that he had never experienced before he sat at the small table in his apartment, surrounded by the Christmas silence of a working-class neighborhood, with a cup of cheap coffee and simple paper bought from the corner store. "Dear Dad," he began, and then crossed out the words. After 12 months, he no longer had an automatic right to that familiarity. "Dear Michael," he finally wrote, "I know I have no right to address you, and I completely respect your decision not to have contact with me. This letter does not seek a response or reconciliation. I simply need to tell you a few things I've learned during this year that changed my life forever." And David wrote for 4 hours, detailing not his suffering or losses, but his process of inner growth. He described his night job not as a humiliation, but as an education in the dignity of labor. He explained his modest apartment not as a punishment, but as learning self-sufficiency. "For 42 years, I believed I deserved everything I had because I was your son. Now I understand that I deserve nothing simply for being born with privilege. Respect is earned through actions, not last names. Dignity is built with character, not bank accounts." He described how he had observed his business partnership with Anthony from a distance and how he had understood that his father had found the authentic collaboration that he had never known how to offer. "Seeing you work with Anthony taught me something fundamental. You didn't need a CEO son. You needed a partner who respected you. And I was never able to be that because I was too busy feeling entitled to everything without having truly contributed anything." The hardest part to write was the full acknowledgement of his behavior that Christmas night. "There is no excuse for what I did. Pushing you to the floor in front of your grandchildren was the most cowardly and cruel act of my life. It wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious choice to prioritize my social image over your dignity. It was pure betrayal, and it deserved exactly the consequences I received." David wrote about his children, about how he had learned to value their weekly phone calls more than any previous professional achievement. "Jacob and Isabel have taught me more about emotional maturity in these 12 months than I taught them in their entire childhood. Their ability to maintain love for both of us despite my destructive behavior demonstrates the upbringing you gave them for years when I was too busy with my own ego to appreciate it." Towards the end of the letter, David addressed the future without pleas or expectations. "I am not writing to you expecting forgiveness. Forgiveness is something that must be earned through years of consistent behavior, not pretty words on paper. Nor am I writing hoping you will change your decision about our relationship. I completely respect your choice and understand that it is just and necessary. I am writing so you know that your son is finally learning to be a real man. At 43, for the first time in my life, I am proud of who I am, not what I have. I work honestly. I live modestly. I authentically love my children, and I deeply respect the people around me." The conclusion of the letter was the part that took him the longest to perfect. "If we never speak again, I want you to know that I became a better person because of the consequences you imposed, not in spite of them, but because of them. That is a more valuable gift than any material inheritance. You gave me the opportunity to discover my own worth separate from your achievements and your generosity. Thank you for being the father. I never knew I needed strong enough to let me fall when necessary, wise enough to protect my children from my mistakes, and just enough to treat me exactly as I deserve to be treated. With deep respect and eternal love, your son, who is finally growing up, David." He sealed the letter in a plain envelope and wrote the address of the family home where he had grown up. He didn't send it immediately, but kept it for a week, rereading it each night to ensure every word genuinely reflected his feelings. On January the 2nd, he walked to the post office and sent the letter via certified mail. 3 weeks later, he received a reply that consisted of a single sheet of paper in his father's familiar handwriting. David, I received your letter and have read it several times. I am glad to know that you are well and that you are growing as a person. That growth is exactly what I had hoped would happen. I am not ready to resume a personal relationship, and perhaps I never will be. But I want you to know that I am proud of the man you are choosing to become. Stay on that path, Michael. David kept that reply as his most prized possession. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was respect. And for the first time since that terrible Christmas night, David felt complete peace. He had learned that some relationships cannot be repaired, but personal growth is always possible. He had discovered that the most important approval is one's own, and that authentic dignity comes from living by solid principles, not from material possessions. His father had taught him the most valuable lesson of his life by refusing to rescue him from the consequences of his actions, and David had finally learned to be grateful for it. If you liked this story, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left. Thanks for watching.